audio recording of virology lecture 3B, viral structures. We will continue by discussing class 1 viruses whose genome are double-stranded DNA, both positive and negative sense DNA. These include viruses such as polyomavirus that usually causes asymptomatic infections, and in rare occasions it causes brain infections. Another virus in class 1 double-strand DNA viruses is papillomavirus. Papillomavirus is the causative agent of warts. It's a DNA tumor virus that can cause tumors such as cervical carcinoma, and it is also the cause of sexually transmitted diseases or STD. Slide number 2, class 2 single stranded DNA viruses. Class 2 can be divided into 2A, those viruses that have a positive or sense DNA strand, and class 2B or negative DNA strand or antisense. A common virus in this category is parvovirus, and it causes erythema infectiosum. Erythema infectiosum is also referred to as fifth disease, parvovirus B19, or slapped cheek disease. At the bottom of the slide, I have included a little bit of an information about what the virus infection looks like. Slide number 3, class 3 double-stranded RNA viruses. These include reovirus that causes respiratory infections, enteric infection, and it's also an orphan virus, as well as rotavirus. Rotavirus causes infantile gastroenteritis. So class 3 double-stranded RNA include reovirus and rotavirus. And at the bottom of the slide, as you can see, there is some information about the disease infantile gastroenteritis caused by rotavirus. Slide number 4, class 4 positive strand RNA viruses or single-stranded RNA viruses, the positive or sense strand. These include poliovirus, enterovirus, and rhinovirus. Poliovirus causes enteric CNS poliomyelitis. Enteric and CNS poliomyelitis. Enterovirus causes respiratory infections, enteric infections, skin rashes, conjunctivitis, which is infection and inflammation of conjunctiva of the eye, as well as meningitis, inflammation and infection of the meninges or membranes that surround the central nervous system. Another virus in this group is called rhinovirus, which causes common cold. Slide number 5, Class 5, positive RNA viruses, continuation. They also include hepatitis A virus and Toga virus. Toga is a family of viruses. Hepatitis A or Hep A virus is called infectious hepatitis virus. It causes acute hepatitis, whereas Toga virus include viruses such as rubella virus, arbovirus, West Nile virus. Slide number 6, class 5, negative RNA viruses or single-stranded or antisense RNA viruses. These include rhabdovirus. Rhabdovirus causes vesicular skin lesions. Rabies virus causes fatal encephalitis. Bunia virus, including arbovirus and hantavirus. Ebola virus that causes fatal hemorrhagic fever. It is basically if patients have high fevers and they bleed to death. Fatal death, hemorrhagic bleeding, fever, being febrile, high temperatures. In this category, we also have influenza virus that causes acute respiratory infections. One of the interesting things about influenza virus is that its genome has 8 RNA segments. We will discuss this later on. We'll have a lecture specific for this virus. Slide number 8, class 6, positive RNA viruses, or these are called RT viruses or reverse transcribing viruses. These are the viruses that their genome is single-stranded RNA virus, but they undergo reverse transcription and they will make a DNA copy out of the RNA genome. Viruses in this group contain human T cell lymphotropic virus, or HTCLV, causes leukemia, or human immunodeficiency virus that causes AIDS. Slide number 9, class 7, double-stranded DNA viruses. This differs from class 1 DNA viruses that these are double-stranded DNA viruses, reverse transcribing. We will discuss hepatitis viruses in one specific lecture, so do not worry about it at this point. But know that class 7 double-stranded DNA viruses reverse transcribing includes hepatitis B virus or Hep B virus, also known as serum hepatitis or causative agent of chronic hepatitis. Slide number 10 is something that I have added to the slide sets, and it's a description of hepatitis B virus. Since we will be discussing hepatitis, I would recommend students to take a look at this slide and familiarize yourself with some of the signs and symptoms of the disease. Slide number 11, we are talking about subviral pathogens. These are agents that are not viruses and they still are pathogenic. They still can cause disease. There are three classes. They include defective virus, viroid, and prion. Defective virus such as hepatitis delta virus. Make sure you don't mistake it by hepatitis D virus. It's hepatitis delta virus, HDV. By itself, it cannot cause an infection. In order for a fulminant infection, defective virus requires a helper virus. The next category of subviral pathogens include viroid, and viroids are very small infectious RNA molecules. They are not DNA and they are not protein. And the last class of subviral pathogens include prions. Prions are proteinous infectious particles. We will have a complete lecture on prions, how they work, with the diseases they cause, etc. Slide number 12 talks about defective virus, such as hepatitis delta virus. It has a circular single-stranded RNA molecule as its genome. It has a protein called delta antigen, and it also uh, requires help from another virus and picks up a protein from that virus called HBs antigen on the outer membrane of it, or hepatitis B surface antigen. It comes from hepatitis B. So, hepatitis delta virus is a virus that has a negative RNA genome that is complexed with a viral protein, as I just mentioned, called delta antigen. The envelope of this defective virus comes from hepatitis B virus and has 3 surface glycoproteins on the envelope. Defective virus hepatitis delta is unable for self-replicating. It cannot make more of itself by itself. It requires some help. This help comes from a helper virus. In this instance, it's hepatitis B virus, which supplies hepatitis delta virus with essential viral replicative factors such as enzymes and cofactors and other proteins, as well as the envelope. Slide number 13 talks about viroid. Viroids are plant pathogens. These are pathogens, small circular RNA molecules that are usually 250 to 350 base pair long. And as I mentioned, they are not DNA and they are not proteins. These can cause infections in plants. And an example of that would be potato spindle tuber viroid, or PSTV. Slide number 14 talks about prion. Prion is a protein pathogen. It's not DNA or RNA. It is usually altered host cell proteins. As I just mentioned, there are no genetic material associated with prions. So no DNA, no RNA. And they cause non-inflammatory encephalopathy. non-inflammatory encephalopathy. As I mentioned before, there would be a lecture specific to prions, so hold on to it for now. Just know this brief about it for now. Slide number 15 is basically a depiction of the virus sphere. This basically, on the outer parameter of this virus, we will see different classes of virus. For example, this class are double-stranded DNA virus, single-stranded, so on and so forth. And there are different viruses within this category. For example, double-stranded DNA viruses include pox viridae, herpes viridae, adeno-viridae, polyoma viridae, papilloma viridae, baculoviridae, polypnea so on and so forth. And the color coding that you see, like blue, yellow, green, purple, and so on, the colors that you see are the host ranges that these viruses can infect. For example, various double-stranded DNA viruses can infect vertebrates, invertebrates to a large extent. They can infect some fungi and some bacteria. And so this applies to all of these different classes of viruses. So here we have different classes such as double-stranded DNA, single-stranded DNA, single-stranded RNA RT, single-stranded RNA positive, single-stranded RNA negative, double-stranded RNA virus, double-stranded DNA, RT viruses. So the lecture summary: viruses are biochemically simple, that their nucleic acid or the genetic material can be either DNA or RNA. They have a small number of non-structural proteins, and some viruses have an outer envelope that comes from a host cell membrane, and virus modifies host cell plasma membrane, so it's called virus modified host membrane. A virus capsid consists of many identical protein subunits that are called protomer or capsomeres. And these capsid proteins enclose and protect the nucleic acid. And based on the arrangement of the protomer of capsid can be a rod shape called helix or helical viruses, spherical shape or icosahedron, or it can be complex. Slide number 17. Baltimore classified viruses by their type of genome as well as the strategy used to transcribe messenger RNA. There are some biological agents that are even smaller than virus, and these are called subviral pathogens. They include defective viruses that cannot replicate by themselves, viroids, these are small infectious RNA pathogens that infect plants, and prions that are infectious proteins. The virus sphere consists of animal, plants, fungus, and bacterial viruses. Viruses that can infect animal hosts, plant hosts, fungal hosts, and bacterial hosts. This is the end of the lecture. on lecture 3B on viral structure. Reading material comes from chapter 5 of the textbook. And as I mentioned before, some of the lectures that you will see include a series of slides, in this instance like 10 slides, that is called review. They come from clinical microbiology, made ridiculously simple. So I would recommend, if to you guys, if you see a set of lecture slides contains this type of review material, since they are in very simple terms and very easy to understand, please go over these materials before going over the actual lecture slides and the audio recordings or the live lecture on the material. Thank you so much for your attention.